Despite their historical differences, Poland has been one of Ukraine's most ardent allies since Putin's invasion. Poland has sent more than its fair share of military support, increased military spending to well above NATO's 2% target, and even pressured other NATO allies into stepping up. However, as other European countries have started contemplating the possibility of a peacekeeping force in Ukraine, Poland has resisted the idea, with Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk insisting that Poland was not planning to send any soldiers to Ukraine, an attitude seemingly at odds with both his aspirations of becoming a European security superpower and the country's staunchly anti-Russian stance. So in this video, we're going to take a look at Poland's Ukraine strategy, and why Tusk is resistant to deploying troops on the ground. Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. So let's start with some context. Before the invasion, Poland and Ukraine actually had a pretty complicated relationship. Poles and Ukrainians had fought numerous wars against one another since the 17th century, with the worst violence coming during World War II. And even in the last decade or so, the Polish and Ukrainian governments have occasionally butted heads over the correct characterization of what happened in World War II. Nonetheless, despite their historical disagreements, the two countries have been united by Putin's invasion and Poland's impressive support for Ukraine. Measured as a percentage of GDP, Poland has sent more immediate military aid to Ukraine than any other country, apart from the Baltics, and received nearly 2 million Ukrainian refugees in the first few weeks of the war, by far the most of any country in Europe. On top of that, the Polish government has reliably been one of the most hawkish voices in NATO, constantly pushing its NATO allies to give Ukraine more military aid or impose more sanctions on Russia. Poland was one of the first countries to give Ukraine jets, and Poland also became the main logistical hub for Ukraine. Today, 95% of military aid to Ukraine goes via Poland. This support for Ukraine has been accompanied by a massive increase in Poland's defense spending, helped by the fact that Poland is one of the fastest growing economies in the EU. Poland is expected to spend 4.7% of GDP on defense in 2025, the highest in the EU and more than double NATO's 2% target. This investment should accelerate a military expansion that began in earnest when Russia annexed Crimea in 2014. Back then, Poland's armed forces were the 9th largest in NATO, but today they rank 3rd, behind only the United States and Turkey, with over 200,000 troops. This spending has put a strain on Poland's national finances, but this might be offset by both EU spending via the COVID Recovery Fund and the new Rearm Europe initiative. Part of this spending was going towards launching the Eastern Shield project, which will reinforce its border with Russia and Belarus, as well as buying hundreds of new tanks, howitzers, and multiple launch rocket systems from South Korea, as well as nearly $60 billion worth of purchases from the United States. Anyway, after Trump signaled a shift in US foreign policy in Ukraine, some European leaders have suggested that Europe will have to deploy peacekeeping troops in Ukraine in order to guarantee any peace deal. Both French President Emmanuel Macron and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer have said that they're ready to send their troops to Ukraine, and are now trying to convince the rest of Europe to do the same. But contrary to what you might expect, Poland isn't too keen on this idea. Tusk has said that Poland will support Ukraine as it has done before, by providing humanitarian and military aid, but that it will not send troops to Ukraine. And a poll from last June found that 71% of Poles oppose sending troops to Ukraine. For context, nearly 60% of Britons would back sending British troops to Ukraine. So why is this? Why is Poland so resistant to the idea of troops on the ground, but happy to send tons of military aid to Ukraine? Well, as we see it, there are at least 3 reasons. First, and most obviously, Poland borders Russia and Belarus, which was used by Moscow as a launching pad to invade Ukraine in 2022. Poland will want to keep its troops in its NATO-protected territory to defend the country and keep its borders protected. This also ties into a sense, in at least parts of Eastern Europe, that Western European countries aren't pulling their weight. After all, Poland and the Baltics have provided way more support to Ukraine as a percentage of GDP, and at least some Eastern Europeans aren't keen on both providing the most support and then also risking troops for the security of Europe as a whole. Anyway, the second reason is that Poland is one of the most pro-American Atlanticist countries in Europe. Polish governments have long resisted calls, especially from France, for greater European strategic autonomy, and its priority has been on keeping America engaged. As such, the Polish defense minister argued that any step towards putting European troops in Ukraine would have to be taken by NATO, and that the alliance must decide collectively to play a role, not individual countries. Third, there are a number of bilateral tensions between Poland and Ukraine, which have occasionally flared up over the past 3 years. On top of their disputes over agricultural trade, which triggered mass farmers' protests in Poland, Kyiv and Warsaw also have a longer-running disagreement over the massacres of some 100,000 Poles in Volhynia by Ukrainian guerrillas during World War II, which remains a sore point. Polish historical researchers want permission to exhume victims, but many Ukrainians consider the partisans as heroes, and officials have angered Poles by playing down the atrocities. While there have been some positive developments here, with Ukraine giving the green light to allow some exhumations, but tensions remain, and this has contributed to a growing disenchantment, particularly among right-wing voters in Poland, with Ukrainian refugees and continuing aid for Ukraine. A recent survey, for instance, found that 53% of Poles want to halt weapons shipments to Kyiv. This disenchantment has been skillfully leveraged by the right-wing and far-right parties in Poland, which are gaining traction ahead of the presidential elections in May. The Conservative Law and Justice candidate is in second place to Tusk's centre-right party candidate, with 25.7% of the vote. But the candidate for the far-right anti-Ukrainian Confederation Party is rising fast and currently polling at 16.2%. He also sparked outrage last week during a visit to Lviv, where he criticised Ukrainians for worshipping, quote, criminals, referring to the Ukrainian national figure Stepan Bandera. Meanwhile, the Law and Justice candidate has tapped into sentiments among some Poles that feel Ukrainians have not shown sufficient gratitude for Polish support, criticising President Zelenskyy for what he described as indecent behaviour towards his allies, including Poland. This all makes it a very important election for Tusk, who has been trying to root out the legacy of the Law and Justice Party, which currently holds the presidency, and might explain his lukewarm attitude for escalating support to Ukraine. If you didn't know, Too Long is our regular physical magazine, with our next issue diving deep into the people who control our world, the 25 most influential people as rated by the TLDR team and you. The next edition contains that entire ranking, as well as articles and long reads about all of the most influential people, the power they hold, and how they wield their immense influence. We also discuss a variety of other topics, from the issues facing Starmer in the UK, to the rise of the new right in Europe, to if peace can really hold in Gaza. These are all topics we discuss in videos, but the reporting you'll find in Too Long is some of our best writing, with us able to spend longer on the stories than is ever possible on YouTube. If you're interested in checking it out and supporting the channel, then you can pre-order a copy right now at toolong.news. There you'll find two versions of the magazine, the standard and the premium editions. By buying the premium edition, you not only get the magazine, but you also get about 2 hours of exclusive content where the team debate and discuss their top 25 ranking, as well as reacting to the audience's vote for the very first time.
We could potentially have a monumental jump on our hands.
Yeah.
Hands up for leapfrogging into sixth.
The most powerful European country, the second biggest economy, the nuclear power that is... The nuclear power!
Yeah.
You'll also get regular access to our behind-the-scenes podcast, The Bullpen, and get your name printed in the thank you section of the magazine. Whichever edition you want, head over to toolong.news to find out more. And if you subscribe to the magazine using code SUBSCRIBENOW, you'll be able to get a copy for as low as $4.99. Anyway, thanks for your support, because Too Long really does help to fund our journalism year-round.